Welcome into the podcast. I'm here with my good friend, your good friend, David Weiner. You know him as Beam a Thug, both on the ClutchFans forums and on social media on Twitter. David, I'm so happy to be back here with you because there's so much to talk about. The Rockets have actually done nothing, and yet there's so many things happening in the NBA that have impacted them significantly. And the first thing that we obviously got to get together to talk about is this Luka Doncic trade. I can't believe we're saying that.
So wait, it's a real trade?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to believe. And we're going to dive into this. Luka Doncic traded by the Dallas Mavericks to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis and a first-round pick. Other players involved, Maxi Kleber, Markieff Morris, Jalen Hood-Schifino going to Utah, along with a second-round pick and some other extras. But really, it completely overshadows the fact that Anthony Davis was traded to the Mavericks. People are talking about a 25-year-old superstar in his prime, believed, just being traded by the Dallas Mavericks. It is, in my personal opinion, the most shocking sports trade I have ever seen in my lifetime. I'm sure before I started following sports, there were others, maybe Kareem going from the Bucks to the Lakers or something like that.
But even then, Kareem forced his way off the Bucks.
True.
True.
This
is the Mavericks basically dumped Luka. They broke up with Luka, not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. This is a stunner. I got to ask you first of all where you were when this happened. I'll tell you where I was, but how did you find out about this?
I was watching the tail end of a movie with my wife Stacy. The news, Stacy holds up the phone, and I was like, Shams was hacked. And I even tweeted
she's
it
a
out.
Dallas fan.
She's a Dallas fan. She's like, what? And I was like, don't worry, Shams was hacked. There's no way that's real. That's an obvious fake trade. Somebody hacked his account. And then Shams retweeted, yes, this is real. And I said, well, if they hacked his account, they can just retweet themselves and say it's real. Right. And it wasn't until Bobby Marks and Dave McMenamin and Tim McMahon and Brian Windhorst and everyone else and Chris Haynes all confirmed that it sunk in. Oh my gosh, this is actually happening. The most shocking trade maybe in sports history.
Yeah. What was your wife's reaction when she found out it was real, by the way?
Yeah, and you can see the Luka jersey behind me. That is Stacy's. She was very shaken up. She was trembling. She started crying. I had to hold her hand. Like it was bad, because Luka means a lot to Mavericks fans, and it was devastating.
That's the thing, and we can talk about this part as well. Like this kind of goes beyond business, right? This is like the Rockets in 2017 trading James Harden for this, for I don't know, Dwight Howard at 32 years old or something along those lines. Like it just kind of boggles the mind. And then saying, hey, we're going to just build around Chris Paul. That's our Kyrie Irving. I was, absolutely. I was crying that night as well because the Rockets lost to the Nets. And I was like, are you kidding? This was one of the worst Rocket games I've seen in a long, long time. Reminded me a little bit of the Silas era type of stuff. And I was feeling pretty depressed, taking a shower before going to bed, came in and just looking at my phone, and somebody said, holy crap, Luka Doncic. That's it. That's what they texted me. And I was obviously never even entered my mind that a trade, because Luka Doncic isn't going to be traded. I thought something serious had happened off court. And so I was like, what just happened? And I loaded Twitter, and I come in, 25 minutes after the Shams tweet, and it says, this trade has occurred. And I don't know. For a few seconds, it's like it doesn't process. Luka Doncic was traded to the Lakers. What do the Lakers have that they could get Luka Doncic? That's what I think is so shocking about this is, and I'm sure conspiracy theories are everywhere, but Dallas deciding to trade their 25-year-old phenom, a guy putting up 34, almost 10 and 10 last year, leading them to the finals, and trading him to the Los Angeles Lakers and telling nobody in the league that he's available. We're going to talk about everything is going to be colored from a Rockets point of view that we talk about here today, but I'm sure that the Rockets huddled up like wishing that they had at least had a chance at this. That's everything that they've always wanted, is to position themselves for just this kind of thing, a true top 5 player inside of their timeline window, age wise, that would fit. And yeah, Luka has his warts. Obviously, that's why, Dallas decided to trade him. But I mean, there's no doubt they would have offered quite a bit. And I think this is going to be second guessed for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for the Rockets fans, or maybe fortunately that we can take solace in this, it looks like Nico Harrison, the Mavs GM, had his heart set on Anthony Davis and Anthony Davis only, as far as the key return he wanted for Luka. Hopefully we'll learn more in the days and weeks to come about what happened internally with the Mavericks. But clearly the Mavericks were ready to move on from Luka. They didn't trust giving a supermax to a guy who can't stay well conditioned. And Nico, who was an executive at Nike for many years, has a good relationship with Anthony Davis and clearly wanted to build on the team's defensive identity. Luka, for as amazing as he is, was absolutely atrocious on defense this season before he got hurt. So clearly Nico Harrison is trying to establish a defensive identity. I think with Davis, probably this season, I think the Mavs title odds go up a little bit, but obviously long term, this is unprecedented. Luka's not even 26, and trading him for a guy who's 6 years older than him, it's flabbergasting.
Yeah, I don't know how to quite describe it. It's I mentioned Dwight Howard. It kind of actually does remind me of Harden in 2015. There were a lot of people wanting to trade him for Kevin Love, fan wise, saying, well, can you really build around Harden? He doesn't play defense and doesn't do this. I mean, this is very similar. This is almost like we're seeing this unfold as if the Rockets did make that kind of a trade. It also kind of reminded me a little of the Darren Williams trade, where something happens in the middle of the night. Nobody even kind of knew this was a possibility. Now, this is on a much larger scale, but when the Jazz traded Darren Williams to the Nets, nobody thought Darren Williams was even available, and they were getting ahead of it. He had 1.5 years left on his deal. He wasn't getting along with Jerry Sloan, and they just felt like they needed to do this. I've never seen a sports trade like this ever. And I get the backlash and everything that's happening. It all makes sense to me. And we're going to talk for sure about what this means for the West, what it means for the Rockets, because there's a lot more to talk about here as well. I mean, to me, obviously it's a silver lining, but it is still quite silver. The Rockets own the 2029 Dallas pick in a way. They have the right to either claim it or swap for it. The Rockets are going to get the best 2 of 3 picks in 2029, their own, Phoenix's, and Dallas's. This is as a result of the trade they made this past summer with Brooklyn to give Brooklyn back their picks in order that they could make the Mikal Bridges trade with the New York Knicks. Rockets giving them their 25 pick, this year's pick, and their 26 pick back. Houston getting, basically doubling their assets, getting 2 swaps and 2 picks for 1 swap and 1 pick. And suddenly this Dallas pick, which, at the time we're like, well, Luka's going to be there for the whole time without question. And I mean, I would love to say Stone is genius. Obviously, I'm giving him all the credit for this, but I don't think anybody would have thought Luka would be traded this week.
Exactly. We were thinking, Kyrie will be old by then, so it'll be fine. Well, now Kyrie and Anthony Davis are both going to be old by then. So it really, I mean, it turned from a nice asset to a potentially really good one.
Absolutely. And I think, as you know, the Rockets are probably more likely to trade that pick, just given the fact that they like so many of the young players that they have. They want to build around this core in some form or fashion. And it's perception, really. That's what it is. If that pick, that 29 Dallas pick, now looks extremely valuable. And so the Rockets are sitting on something pretty nice. Now, OKC controls Dallas in 28. San Antonio controls Dallas in 2030. It's kind of interesting. Those are some of the, those 3 teams with Houston are probably the 3 in the West right now that look the strongest long-term. You could maybe throw Minnesota in there, and who knows what the Lakers are going to look like soon now that they've got Luka. But it's really that's one real big benefit to the Rockets here is owning that 29 pick. And you may see the Rockets. We'll talk about this trade deadline coming up here soon as well. But you may see them as soon as this offseason start to really look hard at consolidating or making an upgrade trade.
No, agreed. Again, take solace, Rockets fans, that you were never going to get Luka. Like this was a trade the Mavericks made for Anthony Davis. Now, I will say this: Max Christie is a very underrated aspect of the trade. I think he's on a very team friendly contract for 4 years, and I think he fits as a 3-and-D wing. I am not saying that I would have done the trade if I were Nico Harrison. I absolutely would not have. So they get Davis, they get Christie, they get an unprotected first-round pick in 29. But for them to not completely raid the cupboard in LA and get Austin Reeves, to get the Lakers 2031 unprotected pick, I don't know how Nico Harrison didn't get those as well.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen a backlash on a GM like this since maybe David Kahn with Minnesota. Remember him?
Yeah.
Nico Harrison is absolute villain status in Dallas. I have family in Dallas. I go there. Obviously, you have ties to Dallas as well. I mean, when I saw that they traded Luka, I can't even imagine it. I mean, that's and the thing is, you've seen Luka. You've seen what he's done to teams like Phoenix and Sacramento and how he is. This might be the kind of thing that lights a fire under him and just cooks Dallas forever. Like that's just it's possible is all I'm saying. I also think when I saw this trade, I'm like, what does Dallas know that we don't know? Because it is just so incredibly bizarre that this could happen. I mean, I would have thought he was easily top 5, maybe top 2 or 3 most untouchable player in the league. It just makes no sense to me. They have shortened their window. That's great news for the Rockets as far as, that pick. Maybe not great news for the Rockets. I think Dallas is currently sitting 8th. Rockets are 2nd/3rd, tied with Memphis. That's a potential first-round matchup. We'll see how that goes. But those are players that are going to have some bumps and bruises at their age. Klay Thompson, Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving. We may see the Mavs make some additional moves, but it's a team to watch out for, certainly. I think Sengun would have a tougher time with Anthony Davis and Gafford and Lively if he comes back. Wouldn't be shocked either if they shopped Lively, to be honest with you, given what they're looking at in his current injury situation.
Although I think it's probably more likely that, with Lively out for a while, I think they're going to go with a Davis-Gafford pairing. But I think probably more likely Gafford gets shopped in the offseason. He's got 1 year left. I think Davis and Lively can probably play together better. And I think they probably see what they can get for Gafford in the offseason. It's just my guess.
Yeah, and that's quite possible too. I mean, I'm sure Nico's gonna. I mean, it's championship or bust now with what he's got. I mean, he's now building around Kyrie, building around AD. Klay is there, for that reason. I don't know if they go for Butler or if they can pull that off. But it remains to be seen what Dallas is going to do. I expect them to do more in the next couple of days as well. There's so much to talk about Luka. It will be sprinkled into this. I have to throw in this other trade as well. I'm sure you guys know De'Aaron Fox has been traded to the San Antonio Spurs. This one hits a little bit more, at home, I think, because, De'Aaron Fox was a guy a lot of Rocket fans wanted, or certainly some did, and thought it made sense for the Rockets to go after him. He is from Houston. And frankly, David, I thought San Antonio got him pretty cheap. We were talking about it, and maybe a little bit pricier than I thought, but still quite cheap given what they have. They didn't have to give up any young players out of their core. They kept Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and they still have a haul of first-round picks. Now they have Wemby. Now they have Fox. Still have some veterans with Barnes and Chris Paul. I think the I-10 rivalry is fully back. I mean, I think this is San Antonio and Houston. You throw in the Jeremy Sohan F Houston thing. You throw in the Wemby, thumbing his, basically not wanting to go to Houston on draft night.
Yeah, cheering when the Rockets came up before the number 1 pick. Yeah,
absolutely. This is going to be an intense rivalry. It is. And I think we're going to see it for a long time. I would say probably easily 8-10 years. Houston, San Antonio is going to be box office. And I think they're in a very similar situation to the Rockets. They are competing for the same type of assets and same type of players. So I'm fascinated by that move. I thought they got off cheap, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of spell out the trade here, it was Fox to San Antonio for basically, I mean, Zach LaVine's the key piece going back to Sacramento, and some pieces went to Chicago. But as far as what the Spurs gave up, it was Trey Jones, who's a mediocre point guard, Zach Collins, who's the worst contract on their roster. They said they gave up 4 first-round picks, 3 to Sacramento and 1 to Chicago. But really, one of the 3 they gave up to Sacramento is a fake first-rounder. The Charlotte pick is lottery protected and immediately turns to 2 seconds. So basically, they gave up 3 firsts and 5 second-round picks, and without giving up any of their good players. Trey Jones is the best player they gave up in this trade. It is shocking to me. Like, this is one where if you're a Rockets fan and you really wanted De'Aaron Fox, like, we could have beaten that offer.
Yeah. And it's just going to be, he is a guy, I'm not as high on Fox as others, but he is a guy who can give you 25, 26 points a game. He is a guy who can take big shots. He had a season, I think last year, where he was very good in the clutch, very fast, 27 years old. It's going to be a tough matchup. It just is. This team's also on the rise, and they've been looking pretty good. A very small silver lining is maybe, just maybe, knock on wood, the Spurs kind of get going and knock the Phoenix Suns down a peg or two. Phoenix just recently lost to Portland, who also is starting to play quite well. The Rockets do control swap rights with Phoenix this year as a result of that same trade we talked about earlier.
And Phoenix has the toughest remaining strength of schedule in the league.
Yes, and they have not played particularly well and quite hamstrung as far as what they can do. So it's something to keep an eye on. We don't want to see the San Antonio Spurs get better, but in the short term, it may not be too terrible of a thing. But right off the bat, I'm just looking at the Spurs and thinking the Spurs Rockets is going to be a real rivalry again for a while. This is going to take us back to the 90s, I think.
Yeah, I was already fearing it's kind of the oncoming storm of Victor Wembanyama, and now you pair him with an all-star caliber point guard. It's going to get pretty hairy a lot quicker than maybe we were anticipating.
Yeah, and they've still got 2, I think, draft picks this year, their own. I think they've got Atlanta's as well, and I don't know if they have a third, but they've got at least those 2. So, we haven't even really addressed too much what this means for the Lakers. I want to, like I said, feel free to add anything on the Fox or Luka trade specifically, but the West for the Rockets, it just gets really interesting. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about the Mavs. I think they're going to be a tough out for the Rockets, and they're, I think, a strong team, assuming they stay healthy this year. Their window's smaller, but short term they should be quite good. And the Spurs are going to be kind of one of those spoiler teams, I believe, and I think next year they'll be even better. But the Lakers are hard to figure out. Also, a team that you think over the next few days would do something additional. They have really no center, but they were just given a lifeline here. Like, this takes me back to the days of Shaq showing up at their door, Pau Gasol showing up at their door, Chris Paul, before basketball reasons, vetoed that deal. Anthony Davis, everything just being funneled so that he goes to the Lakers. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, and they just got bailed out of a situation where their stars were aging. They were quite mortgaged. And now Luka Doncic, again, assuming these concerns about conditioning and all that could be fixed, they're set up for the next 10 years with a foundational piece, and people are going to want to play with him on the Lakers. So suddenly you have to talk about the Lakers being there with the Rockets over time. Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but it is what it is. That's, the Rockets have looked great this year. I'm not taking anything away from them. Their young players have all come together. Ime Udoka has been absolutely outstanding. I mean, I think this guy is your real foundational piece right now. He has turned this team around in a way that we didn't think was imaginable this quickly after Steven Silas left, and they have a culture now that is respected around the league. They're physical, they're defensive minded, but at the same time now you have to look at these other teams, OKC's, and all these teams, I think, that are over the next several years going to be competing with the Rockets, even with their youth. So I don't know how you see the Lakers overall, but that's as far as matching up with the Rockets down the line.
I mean, it's really an odd fit. I mean, you say, oh, Luka and LeBron, that two of the best players in the league. Great. I don't know how well they fit with each other. There was a lot of speculation shortly after the trade. Well, will LeBron want to get traded somewhere else? I think since then it's come out he has no intention of leaving. He wants to stay in LA. And as we know, LeBron, along with Bradley Beal, that have one of the only two no trade clauses in the league. So LeBron isn't going anywhere if he doesn't want to go anywhere. While this was a great trade for the Lakers, they don't have a ton left in the cupboard. I think you probably look to flip Austin Reeves for something else, because right now Reeves is on a sweetheart deal. You probably want to flip him for something else before his next contract. They have one more first round pick to trade. I don't know if I'm not holding my breath that they're going to add like a third superstar or anything. Yeah. I think it's going to be Luka, and then you build around him, and LeBron rides off into the sunset probably. But it's kind of interesting that, LeBron's 40 years old, doesn't want to leave. He's only going to get worse from here, and you're not going to be able to replace him with commensurate value when he rides off into the sunset. So, I think they have a very high floor. I'm not exactly sure how high their ceiling is.
Yeah.
I think they're maybe going to have to wait a couple of years before. Again, for a playoff run this year with LeBron and Luka, they catch lightning in a bottle. I'm not going to bet against them, but after the season, they may have to take a beat or two before and have some time to replenish some assets. Use them taxpayer mid-level exception here or there and add a piece here before they're back to prime contender.
Yeah.
But really interesting. Anytime you have Luka, you are in contention for some level of success.
Yeah, I think right off the bat, Lakers got to go get a center, whether it's Miles Turner, somebody like that. And if they're going to try to put together real assets to get somebody, I think that's got to be their focus. Maybe they try to pick up a Valanciunas. I don't think he's ideal with a Luka. I think you want a long, great pick setter, a screen setter who can roll to the basket, lob threat, rim protector type with somebody who's so ball dominant like that and can run great pick and rolls. I'm going to guess that's probably what their focus is over the next few days. It ties me to what it's going to be next and what should the Rockets' focus be. The trade deadline is February 6th, coming up here in a few days, Thursday, I believe. And, this, David, we've talked about it before, but you've seen the reports, people saying, hey, the Rockets don't want to make a trade. They don't want to make any big trade. I can just tell you right now, this is also, inside whatever sources. This has been the case since they put pen to paper on Jalen Green's extension and put pen to paper on Alperen Sengun's extension. The Rockets' whole plan was to go this year. And you wrote a great piece on Clutch Fans about why it's super complicated to trade Sengun or trade Jalen, anytime this season. And that's part of the reason why. If you're going to extend those guys, it's possible, or it's more friendly, let's say, to trade one of them or whatever, both of them, once this season has passed. I'm not saying they're going to. It's just suddenly more feasible. I think their whole goal was, once they signed those extensions, was to not make any deals. And then once this season's up, after they see what they do, make the playoffs, how they do in the playoffs, all bets are off. Anything can happen. And I'm not saying anybody is going to be traded, but I can confidently tell you Amen Thompson is untouchable in the way that Luka Doncic was.
Right. I knew you were going there. Right. He is untouchable, just like Luka.
Exactly. That's exactly what I would say, right? And Amen Thompson is their number one trade asset. I mean, number one asset, period. They are so high on him. And I can tell you, they feel he's their best player by a good margin. Like, they really believe that. Super high on Amen Thompson. And, but if this team comes up short in a way, they're going to look at whatever comes down the pipe. Obviously, they would have loved to have seen Fox be a possibility in the offseason. That's no longer there. They would have loved for Luka to be a possibility. But when a big name comes available after the season, they're going to look at it. I'm not saying they're going to make a change, but they're going to look at it seriously, whereas right now they don't want to do that.
Right. Now, I completely agree with everything you said, Dave. I don't think they were going into this season looking to make any moves. I think this was a show me year. Let's see how well we've improved. Let's see how we've implemented Udoka's principles. And, I think most Rockets fans would agree this season so far has been a fantastic success. This is beyond my wildest expectations for this team. I thought we'd be in the play-in hunt this year. Maybe fighting for the 6th seed, but to be sitting in the 2 spot more than halfway through the season is just phenomenal.
And to beat Cleveland twice and then Boston. Are you kidding me?
We hung tough. We only lost by 12 to Brooklyn, man. It's great.
That one I can't explain. I know that, Jabari, Sengun, Fred goes out in the second quarter. I get that. We were in the stream talking about it, and I don't mean to derail you, but just Amen looked out of it 3 minutes into the game. We were noting it. Like, he was not having any impact that entire game. You're missing some guys. If Sengun's out, you'd at least like to have Jabari when Steven Adams can only play 24 minutes a game, which is what they seem to be capping him at. But yes, please continue.
But the fact that that's a rarity from Amen, like you're getting his A game almost every single night. And so the fact that it's so notable that he wasn't great is in itself kind of, the exception that proves the rule in a way. And I agree. I think he's their number one asset, so to speak. And I will say
they love him so much. You heard Rafael at the introductory press conference saying they've never had ever an athlete so impressive come through their gym. Since he's been there or whatever. We're not talking about Akeem Olajuwon here in his prime. I'm talking about since they've had that gym. Like, they've never had a guy that impressive athletically, and he's shown that.
And credit to Rafael and his front office. Like, they said, and some of us thought it was, some of us cynics thought it was just posturing, but they said, Amen's the number 2 guy on their board. They had him ahead of Scoot. They had him ahead of Brandon Miller. And, it's looking like their analysis was really, really good.
And the thing is, like you said, we talked a lot about this before the draft. Like, that was the vibe we're getting. Why are they not interested in trading up for Scoot Henderson? Why is that not the case? And we were all shocked. I was certainly shocked. I'm telling you right now, I was high on Scoot. I thought, hey, they should be going for Scoot. They could use a primary, a point guard initiator like that. And hey, the book's not written on Scoot Henderson. He may be great. He's starting to come around.
Yeah, I'll buy up your Scoot Henderson stock if you're selling it.
Yeah,
but I'm not trading it for Amen Thompson stock.
That's what I'm about to say. Amen Thompson is very clearly the size and the speed. The front office has loved, the jumbo playmaker type for a while, and he has really validated a lot of their beliefs. What he does to me that's so amazing is he's going to have offensive games. He's, generally speaking, having a massive impact on both ends of the floor every night, just without the ball, without having plays run for him. And I think when he had that game-winning play in Boston and just left Jalen Brown in the dust, you just saw the potential with this guy.
No, he's unbelievable. But and then kind of getting back to the Rockets' trade philosophies and trade possibilities. I will say this: I'll take a kind of a step back from the article I wrote before, at the beginning of the season, just because of Jalen's contract situation being the number 2 pick of the draft. There were scenarios if the overall trade was big enough, like a Luka trade or a De'Aaron Fox trade with Zach LaVine involved, and the salaries were so high, there were feasible ways maybe to trade Jalen Green. It would have been almost impossible to trade Sengun. So that was, any thought of putting him in trade scenarios was like, it would have to be a ludicrous trade for Sengun to get traded this year. So that wasn't even in my mind when thinking about this. I think De'Aaron Fox was probably on the short list of like truly meaningful franchise altering players that they would make a move, that they could make a move for. But Stone even went on the record saying they're not interested in trading for De'Aaron Fox right now. Like you said, prefer to evaluate at the end of the season and maybe pursue him then.
And they would have, I know for sure they would have liked him to not be traded right now.
Yes.
Just not because they were wanting to go after him. They just wanted that option in the summer. But he's gone. Yeah. So that's just the way it goes. And we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. I mean, I think what Rafael Stone basically said on the record is, they don't expect to do much more than maybe take on some salary for a future asset. And I kind of take him at his word there. I was hoping that maybe there would be a Fox trade there for the right price. But, aside from that, I think that's probably what the Rockets are going to do. I know you had some hypothetical trade targets you want to talk about, but
this is your wheelhouse. This is where you are Luka Doncic, man. This is where you come in and just dominate. I know you. This is your area.
Someone from Dallas is going to dump me.
Right. So I gotta ask. Like, I agree. I think they're going to make small moves at the margins or try to. The name that you just can't avoid, and it goes well before the Rockets played Portland recently, and we saw Ime Udoka talking to him after the game, is Robert Williams III. Now, my opinion is Robert Williams III is not there's not like a huge availability of playing time maybe right now with Jabari out, but with Jabari back, it's just not quite there. Somebody's going to be sitting, whether it's Steven Adams or something. But first, he has real experience with Ime Udoka. Was a pretty significant impact player here. Time Lord is who we're talking about with him in Boston. Also, his contract looks quite cheap given NBA inflation and the way things have risen at about 11-ish million a year. And this is the one I want to bring up to you, and I'm curious what you think, is it's perfect as far as a contract because it goes one additional year. And if the Rockets aren't cobbling and consolidating all these expirings, your Jayshawn Tates, your Jock Landales, your Jeff Greens, maybe even Steven Adams in there. If they're not going to put these together, Aaron Holiday would be included there too. Ideally, wouldn't they like to keep kicking the can like they did last year when they traded Oladipo, who was expiring, for Steven Adams, including 3 second-round picks to get him as a player who could help you and also is going to be on your team next year and also is an expiring contract that you could trade. So it seems to me like moving a Landale and maybe 3 or 4 second-round picks, I don't know what the price would be, for Williams would be kind of ideal type of move for the Rockets. What do you think?
I mean, I think you're onto something there. That was definitely an element to the Steven Adams trade last year. Although I think, they viewed him as they valued him as a player, like that. Definitely. They wanted, this is our backup center for next year. And he's like a starting NBA caliber starting center. So I don't know how much of it was, purely, this is a player we believe in. He's going to come back from his injury next year and just really help us out versus, we're going to kick the can and have that expiring salary. I mean, clearly that was the motivation behind signing Jock Landale to a 4-year deal that basically was non-guaranteed every year to have him as a kind of a human trade exception. Which would be, one reason why I could see, Jock sticks around and then they have $8 million expiring salary next year.
Do you think they'll do that? Like, I mean, I think Tate obviously has played his way to that, but do you think they'll pick Landale back up?
Well, the problem with Tate, and I'll get back to Landale in a second. Tate's expiring. He's a free agent. I think they may try to bring him back, and I think the way he's played recently and the injuries are starting to hit us, that he may be too indispensable to trade right now.
Why was I thinking that was a 3-year deal? Is this his third year?
This is his third year.
Okay, I'm off.
Well, they let him out of his rookie deal early to reward him and give him more money.
Okay.
But
so maybe Landale could be. So I mean, do they? Yeah, I mean that's. It just seems like Stone has been doing this exact thing.
Well, they gave Holiday the biannual exception. I think they wanted him for the minimum. He didn't want to take the minimum, and they had to go up to the biannual. But part of the trade-off there with him was they have a team option on him for next year. So that's $4.5 million next year of expiring salary during next season that they could use in trades if they want to keep him around. Jeff Green and Jae'Sean Tate are expiring. I'd like to see them do something with Jeff Green because I don't know if you're re-signing Jeff Green. If you are, it's probably to a minimum just to have a vet in the locker room. He's been a very positive presence for the young guys this year, but there's definitely something to that philosophy that you were talking about, Dave, of getting a player who can both help you and be expiring salary next year. Basically you're upgrading the Jock Landale spot with Robert Williams.
Yes.
To get a guy that gives you an extra element that we don't really have. We have the big bruiser Adams, but having kind of a lob threat off the bench would be another element, another accent to what we can do. So that's definitely a trade I could see. I would hope it wouldn't take more than 2 second rounders, especially if you could do like Jeff Green or Jock Landale for him, and you're kind of swapping it out. We can talk about some other things because I'm gonna talk in just a little bit about some cap nerdery that the Rockets can use to mostly accomplish the kind of thing you're talking about, Dave. Yeah. But before we do that, I want to kind of get into some other possibilities you have in mind.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't have a lot. I know Bogdanovic's name has been kind of thrown around with Atlanta. That's kind of an interesting name, but I kind of felt like the Rockets were just looking to improve a little bit here or there, or improve their contract situation. And as you can probably break down here, maybe just do something that could, increase their ability to, get a second round pick here or there. Maybe you could get Williams. I just know you had thrown out that OKC second round pick, and I kind of looked at that one as being semi-worthless. I mean, it's got its value, but I can't see Robert Williams, especially now with the Lakers looking for a center. You would think Phoenix would still be interested. I would have to think there's a handful of teams that would be quite interested in Robert Williams III. And I just don't know if he'll go that cheap. But I think he's also a possibility in the offseason. Don't get me wrong. And we don't know what the Rockets do in the offseason. I'm not going to say they're trading Sengun or anything like that. But if they did, if some massive trade came down the pipe and Sengun was traded, do they extend Adams, try to bring in a Robert Williams III, play Jabari as some small ball five? There's a variety of things that, they could do. And I think that optionality is what they would look for. So, I would love to hear what you have in mind as far as possibilities for this team to upgrade some of their assets.
Yeah, so I think you first need to look at the teams that are deep into the tax, or a team like New Orleans that is ever so slightly above the tax. If there is one guarantee I can give the folks, it's that between now and the trade deadline, the New Orleans Pelicans will shed about $2 million of salary, because they are not going to go into the luxury tax for the crap team they've had this season. Sure. They're like 1.9 million or 1.4 million or something over the tax. I think you see a guy like Daniel Tice or Javonte Green get moved. That's if New Orleans doesn't make a move with like a Brandon Ingram or a CJ McCollum, a bigger move. I think at the very least, you're going to see them move at least one minimum guy to get off and duck below the tax, and then kind of play the 10-day contract limbo for the rest of the season to kind of slide in ever so slightly under the tax. So those types of teams are the ones I think Rafael and his front office are going to be targeting. Hey guys, we know you have a high luxury tax bill. You're trying to duck the tax. You're trying to mitigate your tax bill. We will take on your salary because we have an open roster spot. And then as most of you probably know, under the new CBA, a new rule change is the mid-level exception can now be used as a trade exception during the season. So the Rockets are about $9.5 to $10 million under the tax. So, I think Tillman Fertitta is probably giving them carte blanche to take on salary up to the tax line. And they have their $12.8 million non-taxpayer mid-level exception that they basically have as a trade exception to take on salary. So we don't have to worry about matching salaries. We have that mid-level and an open roster spot. So right now we don't have to trade any players. We can just take on a player making up to 12.8, but realistically up to about 9.6. And if as long as they're willing to throw picks at us, we can just absorb them.
Does it disqualify them from using it next year if they dip into it now?
No. So each mid-level is its own. You get one mid-level per season based on what your situation is. So it's almost a use it or lose it. The non-taxpayer mid-level this year, if they don't use it by the trade deadline, it's going to start prorating down after the trade deadline. It could use it for some small, tiny addition at someone off the street. But, basically if they don't use it by the trade deadline, they're essentially losing it. And then, that's gone. And then they'll maybe have a mid-level next year.
So these are the deals I think that you'll probably see final 30 minutes of the deadline, right? In other words, they're not able, as you mentioned, to make an Ingram trade or a bigger deal. They've got to get under. They do that kind of a trade.
But the problem being, and this is, I'm sure what Rafael's facing right now, is that it is a seller's market because of the new CBA rules. Because so many teams have this mid-level exception they haven't used yet. And they're, it's basically like you have a bunch of cap room trades, the cap room teams that have a little bit of cap room. So, while Detroit has the most, they're not the only game in town. There's a bunch of teams like the Rockets and others that have this mid-level sitting there that they can use. And so that's driving the price down that these teams can demand. You're not getting a first round pick for dumping some salary, because the next guy will do it for 1 second rounder.
Yeah.
Or you won't even get a second rounder because the guy over there will do it for cash.
Right.
So I think right now the Rockets are trying to gauge, well, what's the most we can get? And the trade, and it was definitely overshadowed by the Luka trade, but yesterday the Clippers and the Jazz made a trade. PJ Tucker, who was on my list of almost guaranteed to be traded, PJ Tucker was traded to the Utah Jazz for Drew Eubanks. PJ Tucker and a second round pick were traded to Utah for Drew Eubanks. And that was a trade I thought the Rockets should have been in on, that kind of trade. PJ Tucker for like Jeff Green or Jock Landale. And we would get a second round pick for taking on PJ Tucker. We could waive PJ Tucker. It wouldn't really matter. The Clippers would duck the tax, which they did with the Eubanks trade. So that one's off the table. But those are the types of moves I think are the ones that the Rockets are looking to make. You could see a guy like Jaden Springer with the Boston Celtics. He's making like $4.2 million. And if Boston could just dump Jaden Springer on somebody, they would save like $15-20 million in tax.
Yeah.
So the hope is you get a second round pick out of someone for taking on one of these guys.
Yeah. I'm just smirking because when the Luka trade happened, you didn't see like a backlash from Houston, but I have seen a lot of Rockets fans a little bit critical, like Houston's just sitting on their hands while the Spurs are getting De'Aaron Fox. So I'm just laughing at the idea of like picking up Jaden. I think it's a great move. I think it would be worthwhile to improve the margins like that. I just would be funny if it was, their response would be to get Jaden Springer in like a second, but hey,
they're just waiting. Whatever they do, like that's all you did. Well, we're sitting at second in the West. It's not like we're under the gun to do anything.
Exactly.
But, even when I had tweeted out a few days ago a list of guys I thought we could take on with second round picks. And it seemed like all the responses were, well, I think Jaden Springer could help us, or PJ Tucker would be a good locker room guy. Like, I mean, God bless him, and definitely God bless PJ Tucker. But who gives a crap about the players? I want the picks.
Yeah.
And that's what the Rockets would be looking to do. Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting. I think, like you're saying, it's going to be relatively quiet. If there's any super high expectations, I can tell you that's, something Luka-esque would have to fall for them to say, hey, we're going to completely, trade some of our better players for a superstar right now. I think, like I said, the excitement for the trade deadline went out the window once they kind of signed those guys for the extensions. But you will get some excitement this offseason. I'm pretty confident about that.
Now, one other thing I do want to talk about, this is the cap nerdery that I was telling you about before. I really would like to see them make a trade, even if it's just like a trade for trade's sake, in this respect. Let's say you trade Jeff Green and his $8 million salary for some other player who makes, $10 million or something like that. You're taking on a little bit of salary. So maybe you get, even if you don't get a second round pick, you get some cash thrown in, something like that. If you structure the trade a certain way, it's going to help you beyond the season. So Jeff Green makes $8 million. Let's say you trade him for a random $10 million player. You can trade Jeff Green out, take the $10 million player into your mid-level exception. And what that will do, it'll generate a new $8 million trade exception for Jeff Green. So I think you're going to maybe see some other teams do this, that they're sitting on that mid-level. They don't really have anything to use it on. They have expiring salary. So you may see teams trade expiring salaries for each other, but use the mid-level to absorb the other team's salary, generate a trade exception. You can't take that mid-level into next year. You lose that one and you get another one. But if you generate a new trade exception, you're taking that new trade exception into the offseason with that plus your mid-level for next year. So these are things like an easy way to generate an $8 million trade exception.
I'm going to say, you're finding the loopholes here that they're going to have to close down the line. That's quite interesting, actually, to just kind of make it carry over salary. But I think this is going to be, for the Rockets, my guess is relatively uneventful. I mean, hopefully we will see these type of moves, and that would be great.
You're saying getting a second round pick would be uneventful?
I know in your world that is, we're going to be throwing a party. I will be invited. I'm assuming there will be pizza for sure if this does happen. But I just think, as far as, we're going from Luka to Fox to, Jaden Springer, I think people would be a little bit disappointed with that. But I think it's the right move. I think the Rockets are being patient. And I got to tell you, I give the Rockets front office a lot of credit. I've had a lot of doubts about them, since Daryl left, just questions and not really having that trust level just yet. Like, do they, know what they're doing? But they have been patient in so many instances when people have called for them to make immediate changes. How many times in the last 2 years have people said, trade Jalen Green immediately, start Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason must start over Jabari. Jabari's a bust. Jabari's got to go. All this different stuff. And they've just stayed the course. And these guys have continued to progress. They're young and they're developing. I'm not saying they're all going to be superstars, but everything the Rockets has, their plan that they've laid out for their young players has worked better than I can have imagined. All of these guys still continue to progress and show enormous potential. We haven't even scratched the surface with Reed Shepherd just yet. I tip my cap to them. I think they've done a really, really good job. I do think the hardest part will still be, maybe it will pan out that Jalen, Sengun, and Amen is your big three. That's possible. I still think they're going to end up ultimately needing to move somehow a deal and get one true gem superstar in here.
And maybe as early as this offseason, because
exactly.
You're going to need to make a decision, within the next little over a year on extensions for Jabari and Tari Eason.
Yes.
And, the way, Tari's earned a pretty decent sized contract. And I think Jabari as well. I don't think they're max players or anything, but, the kind of salaries they're probably going to command on the open market is going to drive you, well into the luxury tax, I think.
Yes.
And we're not even talking about the decision on Fred VanVleet because, they have a team option on him for $45 million. I think I would be very surprised if they didn't decline the option, but explored a longer term extension at a more reasonable annual figure. But Fred's not going to come. He won't be $45 million, but he's not going to be cheap,
right?
Even on a lower average annual value.
Yes, and I'm sure that's something they've kicked around. Fred is an extremely important player. I know he's had his games where he has been not great, but he is still a very important player to what they try to do. Keep things organized, low turnovers, good 3-point shooter. At least he has been lately after a rough start. He's still an extremely important player. We're about to find out tonight when they play the Knicks with Fred out and how what the impact is with him not being there.
I mean, it's pretty crazy. Even though he's he might be your fourth best player, he's the one guy. If you said, okay, we have all our players, but we're going to take one guy out, I'm the most worried if Fred's the one guy that's not playing.
Yeah.
And clearly, Ime Udoka agrees because he leads the team in minutes.
Yeah. I mean, when Fred went out of the Brooklyn game, I mean, he was scrambling. Holiday usually had been a good shooter, was 1 for 6 from 3 in that game. I mean, he got desperate. Played Reed when he's been keeping him on the bench. Reed did okay. He had his good and bad moments, certainly. But, I wouldn't fault him for it. I think he went out there and played hard. But, yeah, you don't really have just yet a replacement for Fred VanVleet. Jalen's, hit or miss as a playmaker. Amen is still learning, but he's definitely progressing and growing as a point guard. But, yeah, it's just they don't have that. He's not a guy he's not De'Aaron Fox. He's not going to blow by defenders or anything like that, but he just makes the right play, is solid defensively, and keeps this team organized. So we're going to see how they do in this coming stretch with some of the bumps and bruises. We still don't know about Sengun's status. Jabari's still out. So they're facing their own little injury issues right now as well. David, anything else you want to address before we close up?
No, I mean, I'm sure people want us to, want to have illusions of a Cam Johnson or, like you said, a Bogdan Bogdanovic or some other guy who puts up numbers in the league. But the fact of the matter is this team is so deep. It's so deep that the number 3 pick in the draft can't get off the bench. Yeah. Jabari isn't even playing. When everyone comes back, is Jabari going to be a backup center? We don't even know what Jabari's going to do, what role Jabari's going to have when he comes back, or who's going to go to the bench. Amen's probably sticking in the starting lineup. And, we talk about like a Robert Williams type. Well, maybe Jabari fills that role going forward, among other roles that he can fill. Right. So, there's just not that sense of urgency. And I think the Rockets' position, which I think is a very prudent one, is we don't need to make a move. We want to see what these guys are. And it's more value to the franchise long-term to know what Jalen Green can do, to know what Jabari Smith can do, to know what Tari Eason can do, than to add another piece to this puzzle.
Yes. And I'll just add to this, the whole Amen thing. I think their plan all along was for Amen to start last year. That was like they've been so high on him, and that they felt as what I was talking about before, as far as making a change in the offseason of some sort, that something would open up and Amen would naturally fit into the starting lineup. I'm probably in a very small minority where I think Amen might go back to the bench, not because of him in any way. He'll still play massive minutes, but that they will go back to Jabari as a starting lineup. That lineup actually has been good this year, but we'll see how that plays out. That's just a theory and a hunch, but Amen is going to start next year, and that's why I think something's going to shift. Dillon to the bench, Jabari to the bench. Something's going to happen, a trade, and we'll see how that plays out naturally. But good problems to have when you're this deep and you've got so many guys on rookie contracts. It's been a lot of fun. Think about how much better this is than talking about Christian Wood and KJ Martin and all this, trying to figure out how the Rockets getting high end talent. And here we are. So.
Although speaking of which, Christian Wood is on my short list of salary dumps. The Lakers may salary dump him. Maybe you get a second round pick for them, take on Christian Wood, and then immediately waive him.
I'm on board with. I would like to see this happen. Let's make this happen, please. Put that call in. Let's get that one going. That would be great. I think that's it, man. I appreciate you doing this, David. It's so fun. I love just talking NBA with you, and this has been just such a thrilling time in the NBA. Luka Doncic was traded from the Dallas Mavericks in the middle of the night on a Saturday to the Los Angeles Lakers. Are you kidding me? What other league does this? And now De'Aaron Fox getting traded. It looks like a second-round salary dump compared to the Luka Doncic trade. But here we are, Yeah, thank you so much for doing this, man. We'll do it again.
No, happy to be here.
Yeah, let's do it after the trade deadline. We'll dissect Jaden Springer's game, and we'll see.
We won't have to spend too long learning about Christian Wood's game.
Yeah, that's right. But thanks, David, and follow David on Twitter at @BeamAThug, on ClutchFans as well. You can read on both on the blog he writes and also on the forums at @BeamAThug. So thank you as always, David, and we'll do it again soon.
My pleasure, Dave.